First Nun Niphal. Okay, now we're looking at the Niphal. We looked at the Kal for first Nun, and also Lakach because it behaves like a first Nun. Now let's look at the Niphal. After this, we'll look at the Hifil and the Hofal. Then we'll be done first Nuns. Now, first Nun Niphal, it can look a bit complicated, but actually it's really quite straightforward. What happens with, well, let me just write down our roots letters here. First Nun means we have a Nun in the first root position, right? But if you have a Niphal, what a Niphal means is that you have the Nun for the Niphal. Just like we had Pakad. So Pakad was our strong verb. Here's our Pakad. And we put a Nun on there, right? So with first Nun Niphals, you end up with two Nuns. The Niphal Nun, the Niphal Nun and the first Nun. So we got to keep those straight. Okay, let's look at what happens here. Now, the quick summary is that in the perfect and the participle, the first Nun, the Nun of the root, assimilates. And so that's what we see here. That Dagesh in the Gimel is the first Nun that has assimilated. The Niphal Nun is visible. It's the first Nun that has assimilated. So in perfect and passive participle, the first Nun assimilates. In all the other forms, it behaves exactly like the strong verb. Okay? Now let's first look at perfect and participle, and then I'll come back to this and show you how this is just like the strong verb. Remember that the first Nun Niphals have two Nuns, okay? Niphal Nun and first Nun. The first Nun assimilates, indicated by Dagesh Forte. That's this one here, but I think what I'll do is I'll go to this chart here, so you can compare. Here is the strong verb, nifkad. Here is the result of what you get for the first Nun Niphal in the perfect after it assimilates. But let's write this out. So if we put down our root letters, nagash, so that would correspond to pakad. Okay. Let's put our Niphal Nun on there. Maybe I should do this together with pakad. So we have pakad. We put our Niphal Nun on there. In the strong verb, let's just copy it here. Our Niphal Nun is really a prefix. Just like you can have a prefix for the imperfect tense, this is now a prefix that's there because it marks the binyan. So we have this prefix here, so we have nif, kad. Okay? That's the strong form for the Niphal. Perfect. What happens when we try that here? When we have a first Nun, we get nin gash. Well, if you have a Nun that is right next to another consonant, it'll tend to assimilate, right? And one way to produce that is to put a prefix before the Nun so that it steals the Nun and causes it to be at the end of a syllable. Right? We saw this with the Kal. In the Kal imperfect, when we had nagash here, we put a prefix on it. It stole the first Nun, which made it now the end of a syllable, and took away its vowel, because this, of course, is a syllable marker. This is silent shava, not vocal shava. So it smashed it up right against the gimel, and then it assimilated. Same thing here. The prefix is different, but it doesn't matter what the prefix is. As long as there's something there to take this Nun and cause it to be the end of a syllable, it's going to smash it up against this gimel, and it's going to assimilate. So we get assimilation in the perfect. And this becomes, well, this drops out and you get a dot there, Dagesh Forte. So you get nigash. That's what you have here, nigash. Okay? And it goes all the way through. Nigash, see the gimel there with the dot, Dagesh Forte, all the way through. Okay? So it's really not hard. You get it throughout all the perfect, and you get it to the participle. And the reason you get it in these forms is because, if you remember, in the strong verbs for the Niphal, it was the perfect and the participle where you saw the Nun. These other forms, the prefix forms in the strong verb, strong Niphal, was where the Niphal Nun assimilated, because you had prefixes. You had the Yud, the Tav, and the Aleph, etc. But these forms where you have the Niphal Nun present, it acts as a prefix that causes the first nun to assimilate. So what you have to keep straight here is which nun we're talking about. Okay, let's see, one other thing here. If the first nun is also a second guttural, like, actually let me do it over here so we can compare it. First nun that's also a second guttural, like the word nacham. This is a vocabulary item in this chapter for us, chapter 34. This means to repent or to be sorry or to have compassion. If you have a first nun that's also a second guttural, you put your nun on here. You want to do the same sort of thing. You want to go like this. Oops. I want to go like that, right? Nin, cham. You want to assimilate this guy. You want to put him in there. Let's put our consonant or vowel in there. You want to assimilate the nun to the chet, just like you assimilated the nun to the gimel, but you can't double this. And so what tends to happen is you get implied doubling. Instead of compensatory lengthening, you can sometimes get that, but you tend to get implied doubling, and so you end up with, well, here's your mem, here's your chet. I'm writing this backwards, and you get your nun, but you don't have a dagesh forte. So the only difference is the dagesh forte isn't there. It's just implied. Okay, minor point. Let us go forward then. Oh, the participle, the same behavior in the participle. Okay, you've got nifkad. Nifkad is your passive participle for the Niphal. I didn't write passive here because participles in Niphal are always passive. And again, what you would get here, nagash, just like pakad. You put on your Niphal, nifkad. You put on your Niphal, nif, or nin, gash. Okay, we have the comments here. Remember, the comments marks the passive participle, or the participle for the passive binyan, for nifal, for pual, and for hifil, or hofal, not hifil, hofal, for the passive ones. Anyway, that's just by way of reminder. So you've got nifkad, and you've got ningash, but then this guy is going to assimilate, right? Because he's right next to the gimel with no intermediate vowels. This is not a vowel, this is a syllable marker. So you're going to end up with, we'll just move this guy over. So this guy is this guy, and this one assimilated. Negash, negash. Okay. Same as what happens with the perfect. Okay, what about the imperfect and the other forms related to it? Well, they behave just like the perfect. Let's look at this here, the comparison. Yipaked, yinagesh. See, they're all the same. Tipaked, tinagesh. The reason they're the same is because you have your two nuns. So let's do nagash again. You have your first nun in the root. You have your first nun for the nifal, and then you have a prefix here. Now with pakad, we had the same deal. Oops. Pakad, we had our nifal nun. Of course, we don't have a nun here because it's a strong verb. Here we have a nun because it's a weak verb. It's the first nun. But pakad, our strong verb, we still have this nun, nifal nun, and then we have a prefix in the prefix forms, which is what we're dealing with here. And so this guy is going to cause the nifal nun to be at the end of a syllable, therefore it's smack dab up against this, and so it's going to assimilate, and so this guy is going to disappear and is going to assimilate into there, just like this guy is going to disappear and assimilate into there. So the nifal nuns assimilate in both the strong and the first nuns because there's a prefix before the nifal nun. So this nun is irrelevant. It's behaving like a strong verb. It's not going to assimilate because it, in fact, has a vowel under it. So this nun is not smack dab against this gimel. It's this one that is. So in the imperfect, the first nuns are just like strong verbs. So I say they're easy to recognize. The Niphal pattern is there. You have hitic plus dagesh forte plus comets. Hitic, dagesh forte comets. Hitic, dagesh forte comets. Okay. Or the way I think about it, the vowel pattern that you hear and that you see as well. I, a, then look for dagesh. So you have I call these the I, verbs plus dagesh, I, plus dagesh. So everything's completely regular. Now, there is one difference, and that is that you have shortened forms in the preterite and the jasiv. Okay? Yinagesh, you have vayinagesh. Hinagesh, yinagesh. You see how the tsere has reduced to a segol in both cases here, and the accent has shifted back. Not a big deal, but this is behaving like the hiphil does in the strong. Remember, in the strong verbs, I said all of them have identical imperfects and jasives, except in the hiphil. The hiphil, you have shortened forms. Now as we move into the weak verbs, we're going to see more forms that have shortened forms, and this is one of them. The first niphals, or first nun niphals. Okay, so again, by way of review, first nun niphals, the first nun assimilates for the perfect and the passive participle, but in all the other forms, it's just like the strong verb, and it's easy to recognize.